So stock markets around the world fell this morning after President Trump announced sweeping import tariffs on Wednesday. The U.S. will now impose a 10% tariff on all imports starting April 5th, and even higher tariff rates on countries the Trump administration considers bad actors. This includes China, Europe, and Japan. Wall Street didn't fare any better this morning. The S&P 500 opened more than 3% lower today and continues to trend downward. How will these tariffs continue to affect the global market, and how will these tariffs affect the U.S. right here at home? These are all questions everybody is asking. And here to discuss, we welcome Margaret Kidd. She is a leading expert on tariffs and the program director for the University of Houston Supply Chain and Logistics Technology Program. Good morning, Margaret. Welcome to Hello Houston.
Well, thank you for hosting me. This is a very exciting day to be in your new studio.
Yes, absolutely. And I see you've come prepared, and we are going to jump into it. And if you have any questions or comments on Trump's tariffs, give us a call at 713-440-8870.
Most certainly the day to have you here as this is going on right in live real time.
Yeah, and I work with data. This is government agency data that I brought with me, so the numbers don't lie.
Right. And so yesterday, President Trump announced a sweeping 10% import tariffs on all imports. I have to ask, is the U.S. really going after all of its trade partners?
Well, this is unprecedented. We have not seen tariffs at this level since the early 1900s. In fact, the last time we even had tariffs approaching 20% was during World War II, around 1946. We're in uncharted territory. When you think about globalization over the last 30 years, there's a lot of risk in this broad strategy.
Okay, so before we get into all of what is happening now, and I know this sounds like an extremely basic question, but it is constantly, I think, misunderstood. It's talked about a tariff is a way for the U.S. to make money on all of our trade partners. Please explain what a tariff is, how it works, and how it does or doesn't benefit the local U.S. markets.
Consumers pay the tariff. So when you import goods, let's say I'm IBM or I'm Tesla and I'm bringing in some auto parts, the importer pays those duties, and then that is passed on in the price of the particular item. So we have historically had very low tariffs in the U.S., probably the lowest for a developed country. And we're talking about import tariffs as high as 34% on China, plus the last round. So I think they're closer to 60%. The EU, 20%. Think about all the goods we buy from Europe. Luxury clothing, wine from France. But here's a real big one. Vietnam, 46%. And I sit here and think about all those Nike tennis shoes, which about 50% are produced in Vietnam. And, their higher end models may cost a couple $100. We'll add 46% on top of a $200 pair of tennis shoes, and you're looking at $350. So at some point, consumers are going to pull back and just say, we can't afford this.
Before let's grab this and get into what's actually happening, I just want to wrap this whole thing up to understand. So why is the concept out there? Why do people believe that those importing the items to this country will be paying this additional amount of money? That, if I'm not mistaken, it's when it's brought into this country, we put an additional percentage on it. I guess the argument is so that our homemade products have a better chance in the marketplace, because the theory being these other products coming in came in at a lower price. So if we raise the price on them, people will choose American over foreign. Is that right?
Well, that's correct. But where you're missing the boat here is we produce very few products.
Right.
Manufacturing over the last 50 years has migrated out of the U.S. And so we have been overly dependent on China. These lessons learned during COVID, we should not have so much of our infrastructure manufacturing invested in Asia. It needs to be closer to home, closer to the consumers. But those are long-term investment decisions for, big multinational corporations. But let's all be very clear. Companies are in the business to make money. If they pay tariffs on imported goods, component parts, raw materials, that has to be reflected in the price. So this is going to have a huge impact on small and mid-sized businesses that really don't have the bandwidth or, the line of credit to stay in the game long term.
So what do you think is, clearly you have the data, we understand, we have the facts. So what do you think is President Trump's reasoning for implementing these tariffs?
Well, that's a great question. I frankly, I don't really know. There's no question we need to bring some strategic manufacturing back to the U.S. We saw a little bit of that during the Biden administration with the CHIPS Act, geared at bringing back manufacturing for chips. There's other sectors that we should focus on, but some sectors such as apparel and shoes, footwear, these are really low margin. We can't profitably produce these in our country, and we don't have the workforce.
We're speaking with Margaret Kidd. She is a leading expert on tariffs and the program director for the University of Houston Supply Chain and Logistics Technology Program. Now is the time to call in at 713-440-8870 if you have any questions. We have the expert right here for you.
Where I keep going in my head with all of this is it seems as though, as I think you've mentioned, the American marketplace has learned we like those cheap items. We buy clothes for $8 and $10 and buy things inexpensively because they're made in other countries that don't have to pay the same wages, that don't have the same expenses to produce these. If we push them out of the market by the high tariffs and then we're centralized on just what is produced here, those prices automatically are higher. Also, as you mentioned, we have less manufacturing here, so it limits supply too. So what you can find is going to be more expensive and a less selection. What am I missing in that scenario?
Well, we also have to have the workforce to, move into these positions. So, you just don't across the board bring in 50 industries and we're going to set up manufacturing. It's a strategic thing. Obviously, I think President Trump is looking at the automotive sector and pharmaceutical, but even our current automotive companies, 40-60% of their parts come from Canada and Mexico. So we're very integrated. Our supply chains are global. When you have 25,000 plus parts in a car, they're not getting manufactured here in the U.S. The ultimate putting together the car may happen here, but it's very difficult to digest ourselves from a global supply chain. Sometimes there's just very limited sources for certain items.
When the president says things like this will raise, and I'm just making up numbers here because I don't know them, $3 billion, $6 billion, $300 billion, it will raise. How do you think he decides or calculates that it's raising money? There's no money coming into the government from this, correct?
Well, the tariffs get paid to the government. Now, a recent...
By who?
By the importers, so
Okay.
Which ultimately trickles down to the consumer. So Americans are paying this. So a most recent estimate that I saw today from the Trade Partnership Worldwide, and this is just on reciprocal tariffs, was an estimate based on 2024. If these same rates were applied, it would be $654 billion. Okay. And ready for this, California would be paying about $139 billion and Texas $68 billion. So, these are big markets where goods are imported or exported.
So it's just shifting money around within our country. So if it's $68 billion from Texas, that's money already here that is just now being put this direct. There's nobody generating more income. It's what we have and where it's going. So it's costing us more out of our pocket to pay for these items that then the government collects that money. So it's kind of, is it like a tax?
It is a tax. At the end of the day, all of these companies have to make a profit. You don't go into business unless you're there to make a profit. And so they have to pass on these increased costs. The concern is, I mean, these are really very, very high tariffs on some of these countries, especially China and Vietnam and even India and Thailand. At some point, the consumer steps back and says, wow, I'm not going to buy avocados. What was, $1.50 last week is now, $3. And when we look at manufacturing, when consumers stop spending on, say, clothing,
Right.
I mean, you slow down that manufacturing line. Maybe you have to lay some people off. It'll be interesting. This is a developing story. We've got to see what these other countries do in terms of retaliation. I mean, this has just been less than 24 hours.
Right. And we are taking your calls at 713-440-8870. Dale is on the line. Dale, what are your thoughts? Hi, Dale. You there?
I'm here. Can you hear me okay?
Thank you, Dale. Yes, we
Yeah.
can.
Okay. The way I see the tariffs is this. I buy groceries. My wife buys groceries from Kroger's or H-E-B all the time. We spend hundreds of dollars a month at H-E-B. They never buy anything from us at all. So we've got a big trade imbalance with H-E-B. They've been ripping us off all these years, and now we're going to fix it by putting tariffs on H-E-B. So I tell my wife that whenever she buys produce from H-E-B, I'm going to put a 25% tariff on it. If she buys $100 worth of produce, I'm going to charge $25. I'm going to take it out of the grocery budget and put it in my pocket as the government. So now she's paid $125 for groceries because she's importing groceries from H-E-B.
Uh-huh.
I'm going to keep that money, and she's paying more for groceries. Now, she goes, well, why are you doing this? Well, I'm trying to encourage you to grow your own groceries, your own vegetables here in the backyard. I can't do that, she says. I don't have a backyard, and I can get it cheaper at H-E-B. That doesn't matter. I want a strong vegetable garden in my backyard. So she goes, well, I'll tell you what. I can find another field out there that's got better production. I'm going to go raise vegetables in another field down the road, and I'm going to bring them in. I say, no, that's importing. I'm going to charge you a tariff on that too. Even if she owns the field, yes, that's importing too. If Ford makes parts in Vietnam and sells it to itself internally, Ford's going to pay a tariff on its own parts. If my wife raises groceries in another field and brings them into the house, I'm still going to charge her a tariff. Who's paying for this? It's a shell game.
Dale, I think you'll agree.
That's how tariffs work.
What I'm hearing from you, Dale, is basically it's the same budget. You're just shifting your money around. But no, H-E-B didn't pay anything more.
No, they didn't pay a dime more.
Yeah.
My grocery budget just went up, and I'm telling people that I'm making all this money, and I'm fixing the problem with H-E-B.
Dale,
They've
thank
been
you.
ripping me off all these years. No, they haven't been ripping me off. I've been buying them from them rather than grow my own because I'd rather buy from them than grow my own.
Dale, thank you for that example. Margaret, your thoughts on his H-E-B and his wife buying his
The analogy.
avocados?
Well, we've gotten very spoiled in the United States because we can have fresh flowers and fresh fruits and vegetables all year round. And that's not available to grow locally. And it's because we are importing from South America and Mexico, from another climate so that I can have my blackberries all year.
That is absolutely right, Margaret. I lived with my family in Australia in 2019, and I would go to the grocery store, and one day there would be grapes, and by the end of the week, I'd go back for more grapes, and there would be no grapes. And I would ask, do you know when you're going to get another shipment of grapes? And they'd say, we don't know.
Well, you know what we do know? Our number is 713-440-8870, and Michael used that number to call us from West Park. Michael, what's on your mind?
There would be no grapes. I would ask, when you're going to get another.
Oh, Michael, you got to turn down your radio.
We do know. Our number is 713-440.
Well, Michael turns down his radio. Let me ask you this quickly, Margaret. What does this do then to the global economy? Because if we stop buying because the prices are up, so these exporting countries, their industries could collapse because we know it. We're big consumers. It's a huge impact on these other countries.
This becomes possibly a global recession. So we're already seeing signs of consumers slowing down their purchasing. Because of the interconnectedness of all of our economies, this is absolutely a global phenomenon that could happen. And the data is escalating in terms of the probability of a recession. The latest numbers I saw were around a 50-50 chance if we might actually go into a recession. But we're going to have inflation and slow growth.
Let's find out if Michael's back with us. Michael, are you there?
Hi, how you doing?
Hello,
Ernie?
Michael. What's on your mind?
Okay, I'm an international lawyer, and I have offices here in Houston and in Madrid, Spain.
Mm-hmm.
And these tariffs are simply going to be a disaster for us, for Houston, and for international trade in general. More particularly in Houston, you realize we have a huge export economy, and we can start with energy. And, of course, if it's tax coming in, it's going to be tax when it arrives overseas. And then there's a number of things that, let's face it, we can't do here. We don't grow coffee. We don't do bananas. We don't do avocados, all sorts of stuff. And the point is, the antecedent to this is the Smoot-Hawley tariff of 1930, which essentially deepened the Depression. And I believe that if these policies continue, they're going to wreck international trade and the economy in itself. I want to point out, Ernie, for example, I'm looking at Spain's one of Spain's most important dailies, El Mundo.
Michael, I need you to point it out really quickly because we're almost out of time.
Okay, that's all their front page is all about, is the American tariffs. This is crazy.
Well, Michael, thank you for your call. I'm sorry I had to cut you short at the end there. Margaret, 2 words, future. Give it to me. What's going to happen?
Texas is very vulnerable because we're the #1 export state for the last 20 years. Our last caller was spot on. Our largest export product in the U.S. is oil and gas. You have
Gotta run.
retaliatory
Thank you,
tariffs.
Margaret.
Thank you, Margaret.